by the end, especially, there's hugs. I mean, we're friends. I still stay in touch with people I've trained before.
Hello and welcome to Microbial Warrior 2.0, little panel talk here today. We're here with Dr. Mark Tucker, Jeff Jones, and David Hart. I'm Kayla McGowan. So I just have a couple of questions for everybody, but before we start, let's talk about the last, what are we on, day 4?
Yes.
Wow, we've just covered so much in 4 days. This is my first time doing any hands-on training, and I'm absolutely floored. We have great industry professionals in this space, experts to me, if I will say, but I know we don't like to use that word, industry professionals. So we've covered a lot. We've talked about HVAC, we've talked about ATP, prep, site assessment, and then today we heard from both David Hart and Dr. Mark Tucker, and my mind is still spinning. I think Jeff's mind was spinning a little today too, and he had some great questions. So after we all met this morning and we heard from Dr. Mark Tucker, a couple of questions came to mind just based on his experience, and I'd like to kind of hear from all of you on these questions. First question is, what emerging technologies or materials do you see as a game changer for improving the efficiency and safety of large-scale decontamination and restoration efforts in the civilian setting and commercial setting? So if you want to start, Dr. Tucker, and then we can kind of go down the line and just kind of give our thoughts.
Sure, I'll start. So I think one technology that would really enhance remediation is faster analysis methods to determine the effectiveness of the decontamination or disinfection process in remediation. Typically, you have to swab and do some analysis methods to determine if, say, the disinfection process was successful. If there are faster methods, that's, for example, you get immediate feedback, I think that would dramatically improve the remediation process and speed it up.
Great. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, Dr. Tucker was telling me about a new testing instrument that's in development right now, which actually uses light. And so there's no contact with the contaminant, and it will let you know exactly where you're at as far as its efficacy, the contaminant or the proficiency of the decontamination agent or disinfectant. And I'm like, wow, if you don't have to touch it and we can get it back faster, that's even better. Of course, we're probably looking at a whole new set of algorithms, but we can easily adapt to that.
And that's what this is all about, adaptability, and evolving, right? That's how we get better every single day, year, month. And I think, again, we're always evolving, and stuff like this is huge. Even though it's in development, it can help us start to prepare for when that is launched. We're able to change our processes and procedures to fit our new technology.
So I think you're exactly right. And for example, if there is a method that you can get immediate feedback if a disinfection process is successful, that drives better disinfectant use because you know what disinfectants are working better than others, so you can make much better selections of the appropriate product for your situation. So better techniques in one method, in one area, drive better methods in other areas. So I think that's a real key to this process.
Go ahead, Jeff. I think you had a thought on that as well.
Well, today we were doing hands-on training in bio-risk level 5, but fentanyl risk level 1. And then tomorrow we'll be moving into 2. How are we testing that? I see people out there using paper strips and contact methods, but, we've got a method of testing right now that's actually using light. So how much fentanyl does it take to actually be lethal? And that's 2 milligrams. 2 1,000ths of a gram. That's very small right there. But with the new testing that we've got, and it's just using light, we can test that down below 2 micrograms, and that's 2 1 millionths of a gram. It will actually light up and I'm going to show this tomorrow, on a medical grade fentanyl patch.
That's sealed, right?
That's sealed in 2 layers of packaging. It'll still read that. And so that's incredible new technology. So if that's already existing, think about what's on the future.
Yeah, and I was going to say for David, you handle a lot of HVAC. That also makes your job a little bit easier. I'm not going to say easy, but a little bit easier, especially when we have these tools at our disposal when we're coming in and assessing, right? You can better prepare you and your staff to go in and handle the HVAC system a little bit safer.
Absolutely, because the HVAC system is part of the 3 components, which is structure, contents, and indoor air quality. It's all part of the structure. It is a content as well, in addition to being that which is most responsible for the indoor air quality. So definitely helps in that arena.
And just to your point, you said 2 milligrams, right? And that's like a little tiny piece on a pencil or on a dime, right? It's not, I think when you talk about it, people think like, oh, it has to be a ton to be lethal, but that's not the case.
No, not at all. Not
Right.
at all. In fact, speaking with Dr. Carrie Lesage, there's that famous picture of a little bit of fentanyl on a number 2 pencil, and it's been said that's enough to kill you. And Dr. Carey said, actually, that's enough to kill several people.
Well, I think everybody has a different resistance too, right? Like imagine what it would do to a child if that could kill 7 adults, I don't know if body mass has anything to really do with it, depending on how it's manufactured. But to your point, how much does it take to get into the HVAC system?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
How much does it take to get into it? Any amount could get into the HVAC system. And the thing about the HVAC system is that the HVAC system is a delivery device to the entire structure. Something gets sucked into a return duct, it can now be distributed into every room that is fed by that particular air handler.
Yeah, and I think to Jeff's point, we talk about the possibility of things happening, right? So if there's fentanyl in a space, how do we attack that? And I'll let you discuss that because I'm still a warrior in training, so I'll let you take that.
Well, regardless of the amount of it, our tactical objectives are always going to stay the same. We want to contain, control, and neutralize not only fentanyl, but any contaminant that we're called out to negotiate. Contain, control, neutralize is our tactical considerations. Our primary considerations would be structure, contents, indoor air quality, and working off a prime directive of safety. Safety for the forensic operators that are in that said contaminated microenvironment, and safety for all future inhabitants.
Very true. And I think that's the biggest thing too, right? There's a couple of cases, I don't know if we can really talk about them, where somebody came in to clean up after it was handled and lives were lost, right? And so the importance...
This is true. I'll say it. I'm not going to pull any punches on this deal. We're talking about the most dangerous contaminant of our lifetimes. And so in 2 different circumstances, 2 so-called crime scene cleaning companies, biohazard remediation companies, came in to negotiate in an area that was contaminated with fentanyl, and they cleared it and left, and then the property management brought in light housekeeping to finish up what they didn't, and individuals died cleaning up that area. And so, you know what? Those companies can pretty much forget their dreams because they're going to be toast. Okay, and that was totally unprofessional. They did that without any type of training or certification because that's limited. And I know because we were the first ones out. And we spent years developing that program and going back and forth, testing this and testing that, but also relying on smarter people than me, like Dr. Mark Tucker. I spoke with him. I was years ago developing protocols for this, and then was it a couple years ago we first talked?
Yep.
Yeah, I finally got him on the phone, and I told him, listen, I just want 5 minutes of your time, and I'm going to be really respectful. I just want to run through some protocols. And he said, on what? And I said, on neutralizing fentanyl. because he was with Artemis. We knew we had the product, but do we have the protocols and procedures? And Dr. Tucker was kind enough to spend some time with me, and I said, okay, first, I want to do this. And as a scientist, he asked, why? And I said, well, because of this. And next, I want to do this. And again, he asked, why? And I said, well, because of this. And then when we finally went through the whole protocol, he said, this sounds good. This sounds good. And I was like, yes. So, and we actually had a couple laughs on the phone, okay? Because I said 5 minutes, and 60 minutes later, he's like, hey, I got to go, buddy.
Right. I think that kind
And
of...
here he is now.
Right, here he is now. Can't get rid of us now, right? I think that kind of leads me into the next question, and this would be more for you, Dr. Tucker. Based on your experience with DF200 and other formulations, what are some of the most common mistakes or misconceptions in the application of chemical decontaminants in non-military, like civilian and commercial environments? I know military and government's a little bit different, so we'll keep it in the residential and commercial space for now.
So oftentimes I think even people that are using disinfectants and decontaminants on a regular basis kind of believe that it's a fairly simple process. You spray it on a surface where there's a contaminant and it works. But unfortunately, there's a lot of factors that are overlooked that can greatly decrease the effectiveness of that disinfectant or decontaminant. And one of those is the presence of a soil or organic load. And what I mean by that is things like bodily fluids or dirt, grease, and grime. And oftentimes those completely render the disinfectant or decontaminant ineffective or much less effective. So a person using the product thinks that they're having an effective process, but they're really not. So it's really important to choose a disinfectant or decontaminant that actually works in the presence of those materials. So that's something that, again, we spoke about earlier, that having the ability to quickly assess the effectiveness of that disinfectant or decontaminant is really important, and will drive people to using and choosing better disinfectants and decontaminants. So I think that having the right protocols, understanding really what's happening in the real world as compared to laboratory testing is really important in this process. And I think that's a place that the Microbial Warrior Bio-Sheen is really being effective by developing better protocols, training people to use those better protocols, and helping people to choose the appropriate products that actually work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to bounce this off to you, David, because specifically you just had a really big job where all of the methods and processes and procedures we utilize, plus proper use of our EPA-approved hospital-grade, 6-log kill tuberculoside. How did that apply to your situation, being that it was the entire prison, which included the HVAC, and that was a heavy lift for you guys?
And you're exactly right. That was a massive job we did. In fact, we got the test results back the day before I got on the plane to come here the other day, and it was a methamphetamine in a prison, and the entire prison was contaminated with methamphetamine. They did a total of 86 swab tests throughout the whole thing, and they all came out hot. So we used the Artemis products, and we used the Microbial Warrior method, and we knocked it out of the park. In fact, the guy who did the testing, he's been doing it for 20 years. And he told me, he goes, I can't believe this. He goes, these are the lowest numbers I've ever seen for something of this nature. So yeah, it's through the Microbial Warrior and those chemicals that we were able to achieve that.
Yeah, and Jeff, you talk big about understanding labels, processes, and procedures. And I think we all know, we see it, right? When COVID hit, everybody's like, let's buy bleach, let's buy hand sanitizer, let's buy Clorox wipes. But there's actually a preconditioning, if you will, that you have to do before you use any of those products. And this is no different, right? So can you kind of talk about that, Jeff, to bounce off of these two gentlemen here as well? Because I think it's important that it's training tactics.
Techniques and tools. Training, tactics, techniques, and tools. It's everything. And it really doesn't matter in what aspect of the restoration industry that you're in. And some people want to try to build walls. Well, we're over here and we're doing water, so it doesn't apply to us. And we're doing fire and we're doing mold. I'm like, no. If we start doing that in the industry, it fragments like that, fire, water, mold, forensics, that's not very good. It only takes a little bit of pressure right there for me to snap one of those. But when we put aside our petty differences, and that's exactly what they all are, okay, and we bring that together, I can break brick with that. And so when we start looking at, and nobody calls us, it doesn't matter if you're fire, water, or forensic restoration, nobody calls us because they're having a great day. So what has happened is what's known as a black swan. And a black swan is something that has occurred that no one saw coming, no one could have predicted. No one could have predicted that kitchen fire. No one could have predicted that pipe bursting. No one could have predicted finding that mold. And no one could have predicted that young person taking their lives with a firearm. Because if they could, that would have been prevented and a lot of us would be out of business. And what a happier world if all that could be. But in the real world, bad things happen to good people. And so for us to do that, it's best if we base everything on science. Okay, not I feel this or I think this or that committee came up with that. No, what does the science say? And what a blessing it was for me to finally hook up with Dr. Mark Tucker, Dr. Carrie Lesage, Dr. Jennifer DeBruin, and we start looking at scientific protocols. And so whatever the contaminant is, whether it's water or fire or mold, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to acquire critical incident data from your initial phone call. You're going to go out, you're going to test, you should be, some type of pre-test to see where we're at on that microenvironment and its level of contaminants. And then we're going to precondition for threat suppression. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to precondition for threat suppression, especially in forensics, because it doesn't matter if it's biologicals or bacteria or a virus or, God forbid, fentanyl or a biological WMD. We need to precondition for threat suppression to minimize the chance of that going airborne. And then once we do that, there'll be a load reduction, the removal of the gross amount of contaminant, and then forensic cleaning. Cleaning is defined as the removal of soil, both visible and invisible. Dr. Michael Berry defined that in his book, Protecting the Built Environment, written 30 years ago. But today we have scientific forensic cleaning, which is the removal of biological and pathogenic contaminants to prepare surfaces, both vertical and horizontal, for professional disinfecting, or in the case of fentanyl, meth, xylazine, or weaponized anthrax, professional neutralization. Again, so we disinfect or we neutralize, depending on what the contaminant is, so that we can go through the abatement or the removal, which is really what cleaning is. Okay, it's the removal of that contaminant and then properly dispose of it. And then we want to test again to make sure that that was properly done. Testing before and after. It does two things. It lets us know we did our jobs properly, and it also lets our clients know, and it justifies that invoice at the end of the job.
Yeah, and I was going to say, for our consumers, peace of mind is one of the biggest things that matters, right?
Okay, so you were working with us this week, right?
Yes.
And so we actually worked on some environments that actually looked clean. In fact, some people cleaned them, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then we went and we take an ATP, and the numbers are like, whoa, not even close, Hoss. Okay.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. And I think, yesterday's exercise is a great example, right? We have a great team on Team Alpha, and we were all total strangers, but we worked well together. I believe our first ATP sample was 9999. And we followed protocol, processes, and procedures, and our final ATP was 3.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Did you actually say that score was 9999?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. I've never even got one that high before out in the world. And then to take it to a 3, okay,
Yeah.
that's impressive because that is better than food grade. And it's also clean enough to have surgery in. It's also clean enough to open up a neonatal unit in there.
And not to mention, we tested more than one spot on that tile, and it was a 3 on the other spot as well. So it was a consistent process and procedure
Sure.
that the whole surface was a 3, which is great. And I think all of us walked in not knowing that it was possible, right? I think we're taught a little different, and going through this has been really eye-opening because, like you said, to your point, I think one of the first days when we went into the flood house and we cleaned the walls, they look clean, but I think we were testing at like 600, 700, maybe even 800. And yesterday, after we had come in and finished up all of our work, I believe Lori tested and we had a spot with a 3 and a 2.
Correct.
And that's huge. And we're all we were day 3 yesterday.
Right, correct. But you know what? You get the numbers down that low, we're not done yet. Because what did that do? All that did, the ATP, it just measures a level of cleanliness. You know, it was developed for the food and beverage industry. It lets us know now that we can apply an EPA-registered hospital-grade tuberculocidal disinfectant with a 6-log kill, proven to kill both gram-negative, gram-positive bacteria and inactivate both enveloped and non-enveloped viruses. And that disinfectant can do exactly what it was intended to do because there's no viral load, and there's no load that it has to combat. It can do exactly what we want it to do, provided we deliver that in a professional manner and it has enough dwell time according to the manufacturer's label.
Yeah, and I think this is great because we're day 4 and we still have so much to learn. And I think this group of 14 complete strangers have come together, which is amazing. And that's what this is all about. I think this teaches us a bigger lesson for the industry, right? All of our sub-industries, we all do something a little different. Me, for example, I'm on the editorial side. I've never been in the field. And to be able to work with these people and be trusted is amazing because you don't get that everywhere. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. This kind of leads me to my next question. Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
Don't you ever apologize to us.
Oh, goodness gracious. Get it together. This leads me to my next question. So, threats are very real for all of us in this space. And a question to all of you sitting here is, how can we as industry professionals prepare for such biological threats or additional pandemics and collaborate with our local law enforcement and governments to help respond to pandemics or biological threats, not just now, but in the future?
So I think that what's happening right now is exactly what needs to happen, and that is you have to have trained professionals that are ready to go when an event happens. Unfortunately, we never know when or even what is going to happen. So waiting till something happens is not the right approach. We saw this in the early 2000s, around shortly after 9/11 with the anthrax incidents in Washington, D.C. and New York City and Florida. The trained professionals just weren't there ready to go. So it took many months for the government and the private contractors that were involved, for the most part, to get ready to actually go in and remediate the facilities that were contaminated. And so I think having training such as what Microbial Warrior is providing right now and working with law enforcement before the really bad incidents happen and gaining that trust is just a really important part of the process because, like I said, you just can't wait till something happens to start trying to train people and develop the right techniques and procedures and find the right products to use. The other thing I think is that remediation and restoration is a really complex process. So it's very rare that one person or one company can solve an entire complex problem like this. So having companies that have worked together, that trust each other, that provide a certain part of that problem is really key. And those companies knowing each other and willing to call on each other when an incident happens is really important to solving problems like this.
Yeah, that's great. And I think to your point, the avian bird flu is a great example, right? It's the H5N1, right?
Right.
It's a problem. I believe it's in all 50 states. And this is there's no better time than now to assemble our industry professionals with the proper training and tools and just the proper network, I think, right? Jeff, I think I'm going to bounce this off to you because to Dr. Tucker's point, we cannot afford to have another situation like COVID, if I'm being quite honest. There's no reason it should have happened the way that it did, provided we had the right people in place. Yeah.
I'm going to say something, and I think I've got a little permit to do that because during the last theater and drama of the coronavirus, which causes COVID-19, I lost 6 members of my family. And let's be clear, each one of them had a comorbidity, and that's exactly what that scourge did. It would find your comorbidity, and that's where it went to work. And so we laid to rest 6 members of my family. What I saw in the industry at that time was, if I were giving it a grade, it might get an F+, but I seriously doubt it, because I saw unscrupulous people with no training, and I saw people that weren't even in the industry 30 days before that were just grabbing so-called electrostatic sprayers and grabbing anything that was rated for, they had this new N list for emerging pathogens. So it's an enveloped virus, folks. It's the easiest one to negotiate if you do it right. However, if all you do is grab a sprayer and go through and spray and pray, that's not going to cut it. That's not going to make the grade. We can't not do that again. There's a clear-cut protocol, and we talked about it yesterday in class, which we have written specifically for H5N1 avian bird flu, and that has to do with clear protocols of preconditioning, cleaning, testing, and professional disinfecting after that. So I think we're the first ones that have written a protocol specifically for H5N1 because it's not if. Okay, it started as the avian bird flu, and then it mutated and jumped into cattle. And then now human beings have contracted it, and there have been some deaths, some loss of life from this. It just hasn't made that one last mutation where it goes human to human. And when it does, and it's not, I didn't say if it does, when it does, this could be very bad. So, anybody that's taken, any young man or young lady that's taken a martial arts class will tell you their instructor says this all the time. When the caca hits the fan, you will not rise to the occasion. You will fall back to your level of training. And that's why there has to be training specifically on how to deal with biological threats. And you've got to have, it's training, tactics, techniques, and tools. And in that order, training, tactics, techniques, and tools, because without that, all the tools, the coolest sprayers and this awesome PPE mean absolutely nothing. But if I could say this, if you get all the training, tactics, techniques, and tools, and you don't have these 3 elements that I'm fixing to mention, it doesn't mean anything. And that's care, compassion, and concern for your fellow human beings.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think to your point about training, today's exercise we went through 5 times. And the first time we were like, okay, we've got this, let's see how it goes. The second time you could see everybody's confidence and muscle memory kind of taking over. And by the time we were assessed, our whole team did a really good job. And it was a little nerve-wracking, right? We were being assessed, but I think we had picked up some techniques along the way, from the Kayla corner seals to the Chad twist. We bonded over that.
Well, okay, wait a minute. Go ahead and say it, because what is it you were decontaminating?
Fentanyl.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
And we all were leaning on one another, and that's what it's all about, because you're able to get as close as you can to perfect, right? We practice perfectly so that when we are facing that specific event, we're able to let our muscles also take control as well as our mind, right? And I think that that's such a beautiful thing, because to your point, when this happens, we're going to have the best of the best out there, not only helping, but also informing and educating and even training, in numbers, to be completely honest. And I'm going to bounce this one off to David, because, we're all sub industries, if you will, right? We all rely on one another. How many people in your space do what you do?
How many people in the HVAC cleaning and decontamination industry handle forensic restoration?
Yes, sir.
A handful. Yeah, and to be honest with you, those who have taken the Microbial Warrior course. And the reason I say that is I've been in this industry for 30 years, okay? As a service provider, as an instructor, author, okay? And Jeff is the first to bring HVAC into the restoration sector. And I don't just mean just into the forensic restoration sector. I'm talking about the restoration sector, period. There is a lot of smoke and mold and water damage restoration out there where the HVAC system is just absolutely ignored. And in rare cases where it isn't ignored, it's done by somebody that has absolutely no idea what they're doing. They're not using the correct training, techniques, tactics. They're not using the right tools. Now, see, like I said earlier in class, when Jeff asked me to write the guidelines for the HVAC portion of the Microbial Warrior course, I took that as the most serious undertaking that I've ever taken in my life. We spent months going over that. And we didn't focus on using a particular methodology, a particular set of equipment to do it. We started from scratch. We said, what is going to work, okay? And we used fentanyl as the case on that. We set the standard, the guidelines, as if we're doing fentanyl on every job. Because fentanyl is so dangerous. It's the most dangerous contaminant of our lifetime. And if we have an HVAC system that has been cleaned and decontaminated to that point, then it's good to go for the other stuff. And so when your question was how many are qualified for this? If you Microbial Warrior is it, and we have worked it out, we've nailed it down, we got the process, we got the methodology. But unfortunately, though, I would like to add this too. There are a lot out there that are doing it, though, that aren't qualified and trained and all that good stuff. So,
yeah, and I think to everybody's point up here, there will be another situation, whether it's fentanyl or the bird flu, avian bird flu, excuse me. There will be a time where all of our services are needed, and it should be the right people. So my last question is, what advice would you give industry professionals looking to collaborate with individuals like yourself and even train? And I know that's kind of a vague question because you guys all wear different hats, but you guys are also a team. And I think sometimes people are scared to ask that question. So I wanted to ask it for those who are listening, especially on Dr. Tucker, on your half. You did a great presentation today. And I think on behalf of Artemis and yourself, that stuff is readily available if somebody were just to ask, right?
It is available, but we really would prefer that trained professionals use it. In fact, it's not, you can't buy it on Amazon or something like that.
Yeah.
It has to be direct sales. And, there's obviously an attempt to make sure that qualified people are purchasing it. But my recommendation would be to get trained, and I think the best way to get trained would be to try to sign up for the next Microbial Warrior training.
Jeff?
Well, I'm, extremely humbled, to be around you people. But let me make something clear. I'm not an expert. I'm not, and I've said this. I'm not an expert at anything except my own opinion. Then I got married and found out I'm not even an expert on that. Okay, so that's out the window. Okay, here's what I am. I'm a serious student of this. There's always going to be something new to learn. Okay, they should put in a backbone, like from the TV series, Batman and Commissioner Gordon, between me and Dr. Mark Tucker, because I've got to rely on his knowledge to help me prepare for microbial warfare all the time. Knowledge is power. Yeah, I've got some tools, and I've got some over 50 years of experience. I'm not an expert. I'll always be learning because nature is always finding a way. And you know what? Let's go to the extreme bad side of things. There are bad guys out there right now planning bad things, and I've got to stay on top of that so I'm ready to answer when that happens. I used to watch sports I don't even have time for that anymore. I'm constantly studying. Here's the deal. British MI6 intelligence that warned us about the attack at the airport 24 hours before it happened, and we didn't listen, and we know what happened, and that was bad. And so that happened in August. Well, in October of that year, British MI6 intelligence, which is right up there, with the Israeli Mossad, so the best in the world, they've already informed the United States that this is what they said then, that you have 3 to 5 years, according to our sources, before you're hit with a biological WMD. I would listen. I'm listening. I'm preparing. I'm coming up with game plans. We've got match-grade ammunition in the form of Dr. Tucker's formulas. I'm like, it would do well to listen to the man that the United States government came to when they needed answers to questions on how to neutralize anything that the former Soviet Union, a rogue nation, or a terrorist organization might throw against the United States. We're talking about the security and safety of the United States with clear and present dangers, both in fentanyl and the risk of bioterrorism. So I'm constantly training, and I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly listening to guys like Dr. Mark Tucker, Dr. Carrie Lesage, Dr. Jennifer DeBruin, and preparing, okay? Because again, when the worst things happen, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back to your levels of training. And real warriors always train.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I don't know how anybody could follow up with that, but David gets to.
Oh, great. And I believe your question was, who do we look for?
Yeah, or how can people be part of this, right? I think that's the other thing is sometimes people don't want to ask the question, like, oh, how do I get a hold of David Hart, or how do I get a hold of Jeff Jones or Dr. Tucker to be part of this? I think sometimes people are scared to ask those questions, not in a good or a bad way. It's just kind of like, well, how do I get involved? Because I think, we see how the industry works, and this is all industries, right? You can see groups of people, but how does somebody get involved with training under you or under Jeff, to be prepared specifically for these types of events or situations?
Sure. Well, exactly. Just by reaching out. We're on the internet. Is it microbialwarrior.com?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
That's the best way right there. You can get right a hold of Jeff, the school. I'm on there. Dr. Tucker, you're on that page as well. So just reach out to the school. Say the best way is to reach out to Microbial Warrior. Now, who should? Anybody who wants to make a difference. Anybody who's motivated and has I'm going to kind of rub off on Jeff a little bit here. A warrior spirit, wants to make a positive difference in this world. Yeah.
And I was going to say, I'm a perfect example.
You're a perfect example. You're a perfect student too.
Yeah, you're genuine warrior princess from this week on, without a doubt.
It's been fun watching you these last few days. Yeah.
Yes.
it's been great to actually have the opportunity to go hands-on. I think in my experience, I've never been in the field. When I tell you never, I've taken one other course and that's it. Everything else has been based off of networking, collaboration, having a network such as yourselves to talk about things and ask questions, but to have the opportunity to come in, and we're here on day 4, and my confidence in just asking questions and being involved is at an all-time high. It's a comfortable, collaborative environment. Again, I said 14 strangers have been put into teams, and we're trusting and relying on each other to communicate, collaborate, and be able to, check us. We check each other's PPE. We help each other doff. This is serious, right? And we're putting all of our trust and our neighbor next to us. And it's been a great experience because you don't have to know somebody to be able to collaborate with them. So when something does happen, you don't have to know the person helping you. Just know that they've been through the proper training with Microbial Warrior and that they've learned what you've learned and they're ready to rise to the occasion.
Kayla, I would take you into the field in a New York minute.
In a heartbeat.
I'd love to go into the field.
And can I add something to what you were saying too, by the way? Because as an instructor with Microbial Warrior, I've watched, and the most fun aspect to me is watching the group of strangers. Okay, day 1, all right, the first half of day 1 is everybody's sitting in their seat. Okay, they're staring ahead. Nobody says anything. Take a break. Jeff says take a break for 10 minutes. Nobody says a word. You can hear a pin drop. Okay, by the 4th day, and by the end, especially, there's hugs. I mean, we're friends. I still stay in touch with people I've trained before. We really become a tight unit, and so that's my favorite part of this whole thing is watching that develop.
Yeah, I agree. I think to your point, like we're videoing each other so that we can see our form and hear the feedback, which is another great thing is we're able to go back and watch that, not just watch ourselves, but hear the feedback. And people are excited to share their experience. I can tell you that much because they're excited to properly learn and train and prepare, right? And I think that's the other thing is this is I wish it were a little longer just because I love all the people that we're with, right? But we've learned so much and we still have 2 days left, right? And I'm so excited to see what that holds. But I'd like to thank you all for your time today. I think we talked about some key things. And, if you're watching, take these gentlemen up on their advice to reach out. It could change not just your life, but your customer's life. And, all it takes is an email or a phone call. So thank you guys for tuning in.